So I interview World War II veterans every day, and I'm always researching veterans on the internet. And I came across an article about Mr. Gosh being elected alderman to North Tonawanda, and it mentioned that he was a Marine. And so that could mean so many different things. I didn't know if he was a frontline veteran or if maybe he was in the rear, but he has a unique name, so it was quite easy to find him on the internet. And I called him up, and he answered, and he was very agreeable to doing the interview, and I'm very grateful for that. And his daughter, Susan, was there and was very friendly, and they just invited me to come on up. And so I drove, I think I was in Illinois or something like that. So I drove up to meet him.
Wow. And so why even do this? Why take the time to come and interview vets? Why is that important to you?
The purpose of interviewing World War II combat veterans like Mr. Gosh is to make sure that the sacrifices made in the worst war in the history of the world is not going to be forgotten. 420,000 men, American men, died in that war, 70 million worldwide, and here we are 75 years later, and it's like it never happened. The reality is younger generations just don't care or even acknowledge the bloodshed and sacrifice that has paved the way for our comfortable existence in modern-day society. And if we do not document what they saw, what they did, what they experienced for our freedoms, we are going to forget it. And so it's important not just for the veterans and their families, but for history at large and for society in general, that we wake up every morning and realize that the house we are in is not bombed out because of people like Mr. Gosh. That I could go up to anyone and say whatever I want to anyone on the street without any fear of repercussion. Little children can grow up dreaming about their lives 70 years from now instead of worrying about whether or not they will be alive this time tomorrow. I mean, we take for granted so many of our modern luxuries, but the reality is people like Mr. Gosh paid in full for our way of life, and we need to document that. We need to remember that forever. Otherwise, what's the point? He had his innocence stolen from him. If the war didn't break out, he would have just had a nice life, raised a family, and, he could have, maybe been a lawyer or something, but he had to go to war, and he had to kill people. He had to see his friends getting killed so that we wouldn't have to. And you can't ask someone to go overseas and have their innocence stripped away from them and do things that no ordinary person would do or even think of doing without giving them a reason to do it and acknowledging them and their sacrifice when they come back. We can't be the society that sends them to harm's way and forgets about them on their way when they come home. And so this is just my way of saying thank you. My folks are immigrants, and people that look like me would not exist if it wasn't for, people like Mr. Gosh. I don't fit the Hitler Aryan profile or the Japanese idea of a pure race. And so it's very real, and it's very important for me to tell the veterans that if it wasn't for them, some kid in Southern California would not exist. And it's just my way of saying thank you.
Makes you think, don't it? It makes you think.
So what have you learned from this? From interview, how many people have you interviewed?
I've had the fortune to interview just over 1,720 World War II veterans across the U.S., Canada, the U.K., and Australia. So we focus on the Allied countries, and it's a video interview about their early life in the war. It's a video interview about their early life, the Great Depression, their time in training, and their time overseas in combat, and advice they want to give to future generations. The idea of the interview is that 200 years from now, the World War II veterans, their great-great-great-grandkids, their great-great-great-great-grandkids, will get to know not just their name and where they lived, but they'll get to see them as they truly are. They hear their voice, hear the way they say jokes, their characteristics, their certain catchphrases. it's this whole personality that we have the ability to preserve with modern day technology. And there's no generation that deserves it more than the World War II veterans. I mean, every day of their lives has been about helping those around them. And it's scary when we see young people idolizing people like the Kardashians and forgetting about people like Mr. Gosh. And so I just want to try to help set the boat in the right direction, if that makes any sense.
And what have you learned from like talking to 700? Like, is there a common theme?
1,700.
Oh, 1,700.
Yeah.
Like, what did you take from this? You personally?
Well, I mean, like the most, there's so many different life lessons that you learn from talking to people. You know, I could ask the World War II veterans anything about the past 120 years, and you get a first-hand answer as a response. But for me personally, the most impactful lessons that I have learned, it's about perspective. I realized talking to people who saw their friends getting killed, who had to live in foxholes, who had to kill the enemy, I realized that no matter what kind of day I'm having, being stuck in traffic is not the end of the world. Or, you know, having to pay a couple extra dollars at the gas pump is not a big deal. Or, you know, not having enough Facebook friends or Instagram likes, none of that stuff matters, right? So it's really the perspective of that our biggest problem today is peanuts compared to what these World War II veterans had to go through. And so, you know, it's hard to complain about anything when you've met someone who's had their arm blown off or someone who doesn't have legs because they went to war for you to exist. And so that constant perspective of no matter what situation I'm in or where I'm at, I can always compare what I'm going through to what they are going, or what they went through in the war. And there's no comparison. That's why I don't complain about sleeping in the car at night or traveling, you know, full time or eating like every other day. I can do that because I have perspective. And I have, you know, something to compare my life to. Because the reality is, no one's shooting at me in the car, right? No one's trying to kill me that I know of. I mean, that's and the another, just a smaller one is, if you're going to do something, you do it the right way. So when I do interviews, that's something, you know, that's a life lesson a lot of the veterans have taught me. If you're going to do something, do it the right way. You know, that's why I take my time, and they'll tell you the setup took quite a while.
Rishi was with us for 5 hours.
Yeah, at least. And so, you know, you want to make sure this is how people are going to get to know this person in the future. So you want to give them the interview that they deserve. And you know, obviously I'm not Spielberg, but I can try.
Okay. And is there anything else, Rishi, that you want to say?
No, I mean, you've covered, I mean, the main things, you know, that I'm so grateful for people like Mr. Gosh and all the World War II veterans. You know, they're the best people to have in your life as role models, as idols. Every day of the World War II veterans' lives have been about helping those around them. You know, when they were in the Great Depression, many of them quit school to help their family by getting a job. During the war, many of them lied about their age to get in the service because they wanted to fight for their country and defend it. When they came home, they didn't want medals or parades. They just wanted to raise a family and get, you know, their jobs back and raise a, you know, and contribute to society. If you notice, all of the civic organizations, like 4-H, Rotary, Lions, the VFW, Kiwanis, literally all of them are created by World War II veterans, or their ranks were filled. After the war, they became a volunteer army, literally. And so I know plenty of World War II veterans in their 90s and 100s who still volunteer at the food pantry, or they're at the VA helping people. I mean, there's just something about their spirit. It's a very unique spirit, and I have no qualm saying that this generation, the World War II generation, is the greatest generation to have ever walked on this planet, and I guarantee that will ever walk on this planet. a unique set of circumstances forged them to be kind, compassionate, and just generally the best people you'll ever meet. You know, keep in mind, when they grew up, you didn't lock the door, and if you shook someone's hand, that was the deal. You know, you didn't have to worry about people stealing or, you know, and they're so humble. I mean, this was before the moon landing, right? It's such an innocent time. You would look up to the sky and, you know, say your night prayers. It's just and so it's really cool because when you do the interviews, you go back in time. And so and I'd much rather be in this time period than out there, you know, with the TikToker people, right?
Yeah.